Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CDL podcast. I'm your host, Ryan, and I realize I never say that enough. I don't think I've said my name on the podcast in weeks or months, in fact, but I am the host of the show. My name is Ryan, and this is going to be the post-Toronto show, as I'm sure you all know. It is our final episode of the regular season, and what a journey it has been so far this year doing the podcast and in the CDL in general. First things first, thank you guys so much for 100 subs. We just hit that a couple days ago, like over the weekend. I think maybe on Friday or Saturday we hit it. And that was just crazy to me. I started this channel hoping to gain a few subs, so maybe we had a little bit of a community, even if it was 10 people. We could have a little group to talk about the CDL with. Because I know, like, in my life, I have some friends that kind of like the CDL, but they're not, like, super into it, and especially this year. There are people that if they don't really like the game, which they don't like this game, then they don't really follow. If they like the game, they follow, and if they don't, they don't. They're not like me where, I mean, even if I don't like the game or I don't like the game a ton or I really love it, I'm going to follow no matter what. So it's kind of cool that we have now a community to talk to about the CDL, and it's bigger than I ever imagined it could be in year one, so I just thank you guys so much for that. And I hope we can keep up the growth of our community. So make sure to drop a like on the video if you do enjoy it and comment your thoughts. You know, that's my favorite when you guys do that, as well as opinions or hot takes or questions that you have below. And then if you are new and you do enjoy the videos, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to help keep growing our community. And before we get into our new team review format that we've been doing on these post-event shows, we're going to look at the points standings quick, so I'll pull that up. And then after that, we'll look at the bracket for champs quickly. No predictions on the bracket or anything, just some quick matches that catch my eye right away. Some kind of marquee matches or matches that we could potentially see. And looking at the point standings, we've got an interesting shakeout. I would say at the beginning of the year, if you would have told me this was going to be the point standings, I wouldn't be too shocked at a lot of things. I mean, Faze is 1, that's not shocking. Empire 2, also not that shocking. Florida being at 3, however, I wouldn't be surprised looking at the roster at the beginning of the year if they would have kept that. I wouldn't have been surprised at a top 8, maybe even top 6 finish, but having them tied with Huntsmen and then winning the tiebreaker of the head-to-head is shocking. I would have figured, looking at the rosters at the beginning of the year, Atlanta, Dallas, and Chicago would have been top 3, and they finished in the top 4. So that's not too shocking. Then we had Subliners finish at 5. Also, looking at the roster at the beginning of the year with the amount of talent they had, not shocking. London, once again, they win the head-to-head tiebreaker over Ultra in Minnesota, so they are in the 6th spot. Also, not surprising, a team that I figured had the talent to finish in the top 6. Ultra finish at 7, winning the tiebreaker over the Rocker. A crazy event from them to even be in the 7th spot, making the top 8, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Rocker here at 8 with 120. Obviously, they got a lot of those points at the beginning of the season, so a little disappointing that they finished all the way down at 8, considering how hot of a start they were, and they were in the top 3 early on. And then OGLA, kind of a shocking finish for them. If you would have just looked at the roster, I mean, having Kenny and Slasher and all those guys on it at the beginning of the year, you'd figure this is at least a top 4 team, at least top 5 in the points. But they finished with 100 points to win the tiebreaker over Paris, and they sneak into the 9th spot. So they're starting in the losers despite a pretty good run this weekend. Then Paris at 10, kind of where, if you look at their roster, you'd expect them to probably finish below the Surge. So almost probably, I would have picked Paris to finish 12 probably after looking at their roster to start the year. So for them to have a decent lead on teams 11 and 12, finish 10, not too bad in my opinion. Although, despite the late run, they do start in losers. And then Surge at 11, probably one of the more shocking teams. They were loaded with multi-time world champions and a bunch of just great players like Octa and Slack, those guys, Enable. And they finish tied for last place, but they win the tiebreaker over LA Gorillas, who finish in 12 with 50. So there's our final point standings. Obviously, nothing is going to move as the regular season is over. But I wanted to quickly pull up the bracket for champs here. And just kind of talk about some of the highlight matches. So as you can see here, we've got some of the matches that I'm looking forward to. I don't want to just talk about every match because we're going to do a podcast on that. But you see FaZe and Empire have a bye all the way to the winners semis. Huntsmen and Florida have a 1-round bye into the winners quarters. So winners round 1, or actually I guess winners round 2 technically. And then in the winner's side, the matches, we've got Subliners Rocker, not too much of a highlight match there in my opinion. Ravens Ultra International match, the 6 and 7 seeds, in our winner's bracket. That is a highlight match to me because London's been the better team all year, but Toronto looks hot recently. So to me, that one's going to be an interesting. And then in the losers, we got kind of a crap match. Not much to talk about. Paris, Seattle, whatever. I mean, those are probably two of the worst teams. And then the other match, you would figure Optic should be able to win it easily, but it is the Battle of LA. Kind of interesting that that's how the seeding worked out, that we get the Battle of LA to eliminate one of them in the first round of champs. Then some of the other interesting things you see, if Chicago is able to beat, I believe they play the winner of that Subliners Rocker match. If they're able to beat them, we'll get a Chicago-Atlanta match in the winners semis, which is pretty crazy to think about. You could figure going into the year, those were potentially the top two teams, and they might meet in winners semis, not winners finals or grand finals or anything like that. And then if Florida is able to take down the team they play, we're going to get a Florida-Dallas match right there in the winners semis. So we could have the top four teams potentially facing off there in the winners semis, which would be nuts. Obviously that's how it was always going to work out in the bracket, but it's kind of interesting that the top four teams in the standings actually are probably the top four teams, because sometimes you'll have a team like New York sneak in with points or something. And then we could have a Huntsmen versus Dallas match in the losers finals or losers semis, and one of them could eliminate each other early. There's a lot of potential storyline matchups that I see happening. Even Huntsmen could drop down to play Optic, I believe. So yeah, it looks like if Optic beats LA and then Huntsmen lose their first match, Optic versus Huntsmen for elimination, which would be another good storyline match. So that's all I wanted to do to look at the champs bracket, just kind of look at some highlight matchups and stuff. I'm sure you're all really looking forward to champs, as that's our last event of the year and the one that really matters, to be honest. But now we're going to get into our team review format, like we always do with. Or not always do, but we do with the new team reviews. Instead of just going over the bracket for the weekend, I'm going to go down from the top team to the bottom team and just kind of give a quick touch on what they did on the weekend. So I'm going to pull up the bracket quick for the weekend so you can get a refresher on what the scores look like and stuff. And here we go. Looking at the bracket, and the top team in it is the Chicago Huntsmen, a really just odd, I want to say disappointing, but at the same time, it was a pretty unfortunate weekend for them. They obviously take out the Surge 3-1 in the first match, like you'd expect. And then they fall to the Ultra 3-2 and fall to Optic 3-1 down in the knockout match to not make it out of their group. But like I said, it's like, I don't know. At the same time, as they shouldn't lose to teams like Toronto and Optic, they should be a better team than them. It's a little bit shaky because they beat Surge pretty easily, like they should. Then Prestinni lags out of that map versus Ultra, and Formal has like a 30-second span where he's like lagging so bad he like can't even play. He's like stuck in the back of the map and stuff. So like, I truly believe that if they don't lag out, they're the better team than Ultra. They probably win the map. They probably win the series versus Ultra without those connection issues. Obviously, no guarantees. But those extreme issues probably cost them to lose the map and series against Ultra. So super unfortunate for them. And then they just seem to have a little bit more connection issues against Optic and stuff. But Optic does beat them pretty fair and square. It seemed like kind of a momentum game for Optic. Huntsmen weren't playing for too much. I guess they could have gotten another bye, so they did have something to play for. But Optic probably was a little more desperate trying to get into winners for champs. So overall, I want to say it's not a panic button type time for the Huntsmen. I know obviously there's probably a lot of Huntsmen fans that listen to this podcast because a majority of CDL fans are Huntsmen fans. They're the most popular team. But some bright spots for them. Scump looked about 100 times better than he did in the previous weekend. He had like a 0.8 or 0.7 something in the last event that they played at. And then this weekend he led the team with a 1.1. I think he was top 10 maybe, or right on the edge of top 10 overall for KDs on the weekend. And then everybody else was just right above a 1, like around like a 1.01 to like a 1.07. And then Formal was just below 1, but if you know anything about Formal and Champs Time, he'll be on point for it. I don't think you'll see him drop another 0.9. I think if you're a Huntsman fan, it's just super unfortunate, the circumstances that happened to you, just like what happened to Seattle. Thankfully for you guys, though, if you are a Huntsman fan, it wasn't a case where they were like on the verge of top 8 and were they going to be in winners or not, and then this happened to them and it forced them to start in losers. Thankfully, they still at least get a one-round bye, and they're still in winners. They're still in the top 4. They finished 4th in the standings. So it's not time to hit the panic button. Scump looking a lot better. He was like the one player that lacked last weekend, so him looking really good this weekend I think is a good sign because I don't think Formal has another bad event. And I think Chicago's actually, as funny as this sounds, looking very good going into champs. I think they've got a very good chance to make some noise there. The next on our way down the bracket, there isn't a whole lot to talk about here. It's the Surge. They put up their typical weekend with a 0-2 match count and then a 1-6 map count. I'm starting to lose faith in them, not as like they could win an event, but I had some faith that maybe like with the caliber of players, and Champs apathy is certainly a thing. Mr. Two Rings there, and players like Octane Slacked. I figured that maybe they'd have a chance to win a series or two at Champs, and instead of finishing top 12, maybe they could finish like top 8 or something and get themselves into the money. Obviously, they start in losers round 1, and they do play Paris, so it's a winnable match. But I maybe had faith that they could play like Paris and Rocker or something, and win 2 matches, get themselves into top 8, make it a little interesting, but I'm starting to lose faith in that. The next down the list is our tournament champion, Toronto. What the hell happened? Cammy looks like a superstar with a 1.13 overall. My favorite player, probably in the CDL, Methodz, had a 1.18. He looks to be in form. Bance was kind of making aggressive entry plays with the sub. He looked probably the best we've seen him all year, or right up there. I think his like first event he played with the team, he looked super good, but this is the best event we've seen out of him in a long time, maybe even years. CleanX was just opening up the map. He's playing super aggressive. He plays so fast. He had a couple, I remember one map, I think it was against Dallas, where he was like 3-18 at one point, and then he turned it around and went to like double neg, which when you're that far, finishing double neg isn't too bad. He's just an opener on the map. I was super high on him after Champs last year. I was waiting for him to get on the starting roster and hoping he would. And he's proven that to me. He's a player that deserves to be in the league and deserves to stay. And if you say he's just good online, that's kind of stupid, because he was frying pro teams as an unknown name on LAN last year at Champs. And then Classic had a 0.78, obviously not a great tournament for him, but he was kind of throwing himself at scrap, and I don't want to say definitively he was doing it, but he seemed to be watching a lot of kill cams and calling out where the other team was due to that glitch, and we'll get into that later, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But regardless of if they were doing that glitch and kind of looking where people were, they did take out Optic, who's a very good team. They took out Huntsmen, who's also obviously a very good team, and then Empire and Faze, who are top teams. So with or without this glitch, it's still pretty impressive that they're able to take out 3 of the top 4 teams, and Optic, who is another pretty good team. To me, they are a true dark horse now, and like I said, we're going to address that kill cam thing later, but extremely strong showing for them, and really cool to see them get into the top 8, because in my opinion, they deserve and they have a chance to make more noise than like if a team like Paris were to stay at 8. No offense to Paris, but I think Toronto has more of a chance to make noise and cause some upsets up there in the winners bracket than Paris does. And then OGLA is next down the bracket. They had a strong showing. Obviously not what they wanted. They don't get into the top 8, but who would have expected Toronto to win this event to counter them from not getting top 8? Draza showed extreme promise. He dropped a 1.2, as well as Hollow also dropped a 1.2. And then Slasher and Kenny both had 0.9s, and I know they're better than that. If you know anything about me and my thoughts on Kenny and Slasher, obviously all of you know Slasher, elite player. I think he's going to have no problem getting into form for Champs as long as connection holds up. And Kenny, to me, he should have been like a 3-time MVP in World War II. I think he should have been the MVP of every event they won. I think, obviously, Chino and Accuracy, you can make an argument they deserve those MVPs, because they certainly did. But to me, Kenny was the best player on the team. I think Kenny was the best player in World War II, either him or Gunless. I've been super high on Kenny. Obviously, he was pretty good in AW when he played, and then the age rule hit, and I don't think he was able to play at all in BO3 or IW. Then World War II rolls around, I think, throughout the whole year, because obviously Gunless starts on Echo Fox, isn't as good in the beginning. I think consistency throughout the whole year, Kenny's the best player of World War II, especially considering they finished second at Champs and Rise finished like top 16 or whatever. And then I think you go into BO4 with Kenny. He starts slow, and then I think by middle to end of the year, he's a top 10 player. To me, he's like, if I'm starting a team in a franchise, he's like one of my first picks. So I think he's going to turn it around. This little bit of a struggle event, Slasher's obviously going to turn it around. And then TJ also showed some life for the first time in like forever, in months. He dropped like a 0.89, a 0.9, which isn't like amazing or anything, but he took over in that one Game 5 S&D, and he just looked finally like the player we know he can be, an entry sub that is very good at picking up 2 pieces when he enters the hill. We obviously know he's a great player. I think he just doesn't like the game, and TJ seems like a guy that needs motivation and needs to like the game to do well, but he also is a guy that everybody says plays best when money's on the line, so we'll see. If he steps up, I think Slasher and Kenny are both going to get better. Draza and Hollow look good. If TJ steps up, Optic can make some noise at Champs. They also take out Huntsmen this weekend, and I think they're poised to make a run through losers at champs, like I said, being in the 9 seed. I think taking out Huntsmen will be a confidence boost for them, and I hope they can make a run because with the caliber of players they have, like I've talked about a million times, I think they're able to make matches more interesting later on in the tournament rather than if like an LA Gorillas make a run deep in the tournament. Once they start playing the top teams, they'll probably get smoked. Same with like Seattle or some of those other bottom teams like Paris. Once they start to face the really, really good teams, they're probably going to get smoked, but I don't think Optic will probably lose to those good teams, but I don't think they get smoked, so I'd like to see them make a run. The next team is Faze. They were obviously back in form. I think they're now my favorites. Not saying I'm going to pick them for champs, but I think if it were to be played next weekend, if like there's no meta shift or anything, if we play on the current meta and stuff, I think Faze would have to be my favorite to win champs. I think they have the best shot as of right now. They looked unreal. They 3-0'd Minnesota to start the weekend, then they 3-0'd Dallas, and then they 3-0'd OGLA to make it to the finals. They had a perfect record going into finals. And then in this finals, yes, they lost in 5 maps in that Game 5, Round 11. And yeah, Toronto may have been using the kill cam glitch a little bit. I know FaZe is kind of accusing them of it. But if you look at the finals, they lost the map 1 to Toronto, 250 to 247. If you know anything about COD, you know if you lose by 3 points like that, one little kill goes your way, they should be able to win that map. So they could have won that map. Then in the Dom, they lose 165 to 157. Dom is such a fluky game mode too. If you lose by 8 points, you know a couple things go right. You could have easily won that map. Then they lose the map 5 in round 11. There's a ninja defuse that goes on. There's an insane Methodz 1v2 clutch that happens. So once again, they easily could have won this map. And then the 2 maps that FaZe won, they won 6-0 in Search and 250 to 143, which in Modern Warfare is a blowout in Hardpoint. So they blew them out in 2 maps and then barely lost the other 3 maps. So FaZe could have easily won all 5 maps in this series. But that's just how COD is sometimes. I still think they're a way better team than Toronto. It just happened to be that all the clutch situations just didn't go their way in a lot of the maps. Simp and Abezy were unreal. They had 1.25s. Priestahh on the AR had a massive improvement. I mean, he was dropping consistent like 0.8s and 0.9s, and we know Priest is better than that. But finally, he got in a more comfortable role with the M4, and he dropped a 1.16. Major Maniac stays solid with a 1.08, which, by the way, I kind of feel bad for Major Maniac. I know I said, like, in a couple videos ago that maybe if they had a more structured veteran AR, they'd be better. Obviously, Major Maniac is still disgusting, but I kind of feel bad for him. I feel like his role is so boring sometimes. Like, sometimes in a Dom, I'll look, or in a hardpoint, I'll look, and they're, like, almost done with the game, and the dude's, like, 9-7. Like, it's not his fault that his team is killing everything in front of him and he's just holding spawns or like holding a hill, but dude gets a ton of hill time and he is like, by the end of like a hardpoint map that's like 250 to 230, he finishes like 14-11, which, I mean, that's not a bad map, but he gets no engagements because of his team. I kind of feel bad for him. And then Cellium had a 0.94, which is a little bit below his standard he's set this year, but he was in a new role playing with a sub more often. I think he played just slightly worse than we're used to seeing him playing, but to me, the trade-off is worth it because Priestahh was so much better. Priestahh was in like his final form with that AR in his hand, and Cellium was maybe a little bit worse than he was in his old role, but he was almost the same, and to me, having Cellium be at about the same level, but Priestahh be at, I mean, a 0.3 improvement in his KD, I think that's more valuable as a trade-off because Priestahh is just so much better with an AR than a sub in this particular Call of Duty title. Then the next team, kind of like Seattle, not a whole lot to say here. It's Minnesota. They go 1-6 in map count on the weekend. Granted, they did not catch any breaks considering they had to play Atlanta first, and then they had to play Florida. And there was no chance they were catching a break because once they lost to Atlanta, they either had to play Florida or Dallas. That's just a brutal draw. But to me, they prove once again that they just cannot beat top teams. They can't hang with the top teams anymore. So that's the only takeaway I really have for them. They're an okay team, and they can certainly beat any middle-of-the-pack team, but they just still prove that. I don't think they can hang with the top teams anymore in this title. Then we go down to Florida. They had a tough weekend, but once again, a little bit justifiable in some ways. They lose 3-2 to Dallas in a very tight match. Then they take out Minnesota, and then they get swept by Dallas to leave the tournament. There's really no shame in losing to Dallas twice. I could easily see if there was another tournament next weekend, Florida could beat Dallas twice. They're both basically on the same level, but Dallas was just a little hotter this weekend, it seemed like. But you do have to say that Florida showed they're vulnerable once again. We were thinking maybe last weekend was a little bit of a fluke. They had a slight off weekend. Once again, they didn't play bad this weekend. They lost to Dallas twice, who's a very good team. I still think they're a threat to win champs and are among the top teams, but they're definitely not like couple weeks ago, it was like if you pick against Florida, you're pretty stupid because they were unstoppable. I still think they have a threat to win champs, but they're definitely beatable and look a lot more vulnerable, and teams aren't fearing them as much anymore. Awakening bounced back super well. He didn't even have a bad event last event, but this one he had a 1.23. Skies and Fero both look good. They had 1.12 KDs. Although for Skies, that is a bit low this year. Obviously, it's still extremely good, but we're used to him having like 1.24s and stuff. But he still played pretty well. Frosty looked very good with a 1.01. He's usually been around a 0.9 this year, so him dropping 1.01 is good. He was making big plays. Havoc struggled big time with a 0.78. I honestly think if Havoc is around a 0.9 this weekend, has a little bit better weekend, they probably do better, maybe even beat Dallas in that first series. But I think Havoc's going to bounce back. He's been consistently very good entry sub for them all year. He has a tough role, probably the toughest role on the team to do. I think he's going to bounce back, no problem. I think there's, just like Chicago, there's no need to panic for Florida. They still have a very legit chance to at least make top 3 or make it very far at champs, especially with a one-round bye. No need to hit the panic button for them. And then lastly, the last team on the list for this weekend in the bottom of the bracket here is the Dallas Empire. Kind of a good and bad mix for them this weekend. The good is that they reestablished this recent dominance they have on Florida, and I think that Florida's a team of a lot of young players. I mean, obviously they've got Frosty, he's a Halo World Champ on Havoc. He's been to a lot of finals and like at that level kind of. Awakening's obviously pretty new, and then Skies is also new, and Fero's won 1 championship, and then what if you count the ones this year. So overall, they're a pretty new team. Newer players, younger players with not as much experience. So I think getting beat 3-0 last weekend by Dallas, and then also getting beat 3-2 and 3-0 again this weekend by Dallas. They've gotten beat 3 times in the last 2 weekends. I think that could maybe get in Florida's head a little bit. I don't know if it for sure will, but it might give Dallas a little bit of a mental edge over them. So I think that was really good for Dallas to get that done and not let Florida beat them any of the last 3 times, to kind of be like, hey, we're the big dog here. And then they got smoked by Atlanta. And then they lost tight maps to a hot Toronto team who had a lot to play for. Granted, Dallas also did have enough to play for. If they won and then were able to win the event, they get the number 1 seed at champs. But Toronto was playing for a shot in winner's bracket, so they really had a lot to play for and probably a little bit more motivation. Shottzyy had a 1.09, which is pretty good for him. And then Crim had a 1.01, which is also solid for him. Everyone else was in the 0.9s. Clay, illey, and huke. Especially, I mean, illey was around more of his average for the season, not the insane 1.25 or whatever it was that we saw last weekend. He was more around his average. Clay was a bit off and huke was a bit off, but once again, I mean, Clay's like a 15-time champ, 2-time world champ. Huke is one of the most talented players in FPS history. I have no doubt that those two are going to bounce back. illey was around his average, and if he can get a little better, they're looking so good for champs. They start top 6 at champs in the bracket, and I'm pretty confident they're going to advance past that. No need to panic after this weekend for them. Now that we're done with that, we are going to go into the MVP segment. We do the losing team MVP first, then we get into the winning team MVP. The losing team MVP, like I say, has to probably be somebody that at least made it to the bracket play or the semifinals. And to me, that losing team MVP comes from the Atlanta Faze, and it's Simp. I wanted so badly to give it to Priestahh because he struggled so much lately with a bunch of 0.8s and 0.9s, but he jumped all the way to a 1.16. And if you're going to say that your MVP is Priestahh, I have no problem with that whatsoever. I think he completely deserves that MVP. But for some reason, after looking through the detailed stats on Easy Max, shout out to him on his CDL 2020 stats lab, I think you've got to give it to Simp, mostly because he dropped a 1.25 overall, which is the same as Abezy, but he also had a 2.0 in S&D. And over the last few events, Atlanta was a little bit inconsistent in S&D. Despite being one of the better S&D teams all year, they seemed a little inconsistent lately. And I think Simp said, you know what, we're going to get back to our consistency in winning S&Ds. He drops a 2.0 overall. I think he helped to turn around their S&D this weekend. The sub is now in his hands in the ARs and Priestahh. Like I said in the last podcast, should turn, that's what they should do. They should turn to Priestahh with the AR and Simp with the sub because that's their more natural roles. And I think they do this, it makes Priestahh 100 times better. Simp roughly stays at the same KD and same overall player, but Priestahh gets way more comfortable, which shows that you need to keep Priestahh in that role since Simp can do it all. And I think they just turn themselves into the team to beat at champs. I think they're the team that everybody's going to be gunning for. Priestahh and Simp both hit closer to the MVP forms we know they had, but I have to give it to Simp here. And then the winning team MVP, I think you all know where I have to go here. I don't think you can give it to Bance, CleanX, or especially not Classic. You can maybe make a little bit of an argument for CleanX because he was making big plays, but consistency-wise, Cammy's my MVP. He was the most consistent all weekend. He was disgusting all weekend. You know I wanted to give it to my favorite player probably in the CDL, Methodz. But to me, it's got to be Cammy flat out. I mean, he had a 1.13 overall. Methodz did have a 1.18, but Methodz plays an easier role. He has an AR in his hands all the time. He plays a slower AR role. Cammy was so consistent all weekend. He had a 1.13 overall, and they had a pretty large sample size of search and destroy maps, and he had a 1.57. He was taking over with a sniper on so many maps. I mean, he was changing the game. He had that battle versus Draza, and I think it was the first day in that map 5 where they both had like 17 kills. Dude was all over the map. And like I said, you could easily say Methodz was the MVP for like the clutch moments he had. That ninja defuse in map 5 of the grand final kind of like changed the course of the map. And then he 1v2'd him round 11 to win it. So if you're just going based off pure clutch moments, you could say those are MVP-worthy plays for Methodz, but I'm going for the overall crazy plays from Cammy the whole weekend and the consistency he showed. He also went nuts versus Empire in the semifinals, probably the best series I've ever seen him play in the limited time I've been watching him, and that's the main reason they won that series and then won the event, in my opinion, is because of the momentum he started by smoking Dallas in that semifinal. So yeah, we got the losing team MVP as Simp and the winning team MVP as Cammy. Pretty straightforward. I think a lot of you would either choose Priestahh or Simp or maybe Abezy for your losing MVP. And then I think everybody would pick Cammy as their MVP with maybe a couple people picking Methodz and maybe a few picking CleanX. Maybe Classic for watching the kill cams. I don't know. Now we're going to get into our power rankings, though. I think we're going to start this time. We usually go 1 down to 12, but I think this time we're going to start at 12 because I think you pretty much all know who the top 4 are, and then there's a little bit of a question in the middle, but I think we're going to start from the bottom. So this is like my, we'll go into the tiers after where I put them, but 12 is Gorillas, no shock there. I think they're the worst team in the league. I don't think there's much to talk about there. I think that they're not going to make a lot of noise at champs. And then the 11 spots this is where it gets kind of, 9 through 11 gets kind of like jumbled up. It's honestly who you feel most confident in. I think you can put them in any order. Surge is at 11 for me, though. I think they have more potential than Gorillas to make noise, which is why they're above them. They also beat Gorillas like every time they played this year, basically. They have just more talented players, so they're at 11, but once again, not much chance to make noise. And then at 10, we have the Minnesota Rocker. They're below Paris just because of recent performance. Paris was able to make a final recently. Minnesota hasn't been able to win a match recently. I do think Minnesota is a more talented team than Paris. But Paris seems to know the game better. I think their maybe connection spread might be better, I guess. Although I think they are all basically in LA. But Minnesota falls at 10 with Paris at 9. There's not a lot to talk about with these teams because, like I said, I don't see these teams doing much besides maybe winning a round or 2 at champs. Minnesota is the only one of the 4 that is starting in the winner's side, so maybe they have the best chance since they do have a cushion to lose a map or lose a match. And then in the 8th spot, we've got OGLA. To me, they feel like a team that they're in the 8th spot, but I think here's where I start with teams that I believe could win champs. I think OGLA is an extreme long shot because they start in losers bracket. They have to win like 8 series in a row to win. Do I think they win champs? No, but I think this is where you start with the teams with the super long shot. Like throw down a couple dollars on them and you might win a few thousand because their odds are so bad. But OGLA is in the 8th spot to me because I think this weekend they showed some potential. If Draza and Hollow play solid, I think Champs Time, Slasher, Kenny, and TJ are going to step up big time. I think OGLA is an improving team right now. I think they're trending upward, and I think they have a chance to maybe make some noise, start from top 12, maybe make it to like top 6 at Champs or something. Then 7, we have London. This feels a little weird to me because the last time we saw London, they looked very good. And to me, they're another team that has potential to kind of sneak into that top 6, maybe top 4 at Champs. And who knows where they go from there. But they're at 7 simply because I would pick New York to beat them most times head-to-head, although I think they're basically dead even. So it feels weird to have them at 7 to me because I think they're a team that has potential to get top 4, but the teams above them are either hotter than them right now or just have maybe been a little better all year. So I have London at 7. Then at 6, we've got New York. I feel like both London and New York could be ahead of my 5 team, but the 5 team has been hot recently, especially this weekend. You know who it is. But New York looked ice cold last weekend, so I feel like I could drop them below London. But for now, I'm going to keep New York above London just because head-to-head, I think I'd still pick New York. But if I like watch some scrims or hear of a new meta change or hear of how teams are playing in scrims, if I do a power rankings ahead of champs, I may jump London ahead of New York. But to me, they're both a toss-up. You could order them either way. Then 5, based on how hot they've been the last couple events, they made the semifinal in the event they played in 2 weeks ago, and then they made the final and won it in this event. It's the Toronto Ultra. They're mostly here based off how hot they've been recently. I could easily, once again, see you putting like London or New York ahead of them, but due to the fact that they've made a semifinal and then won an event back-to-back, especially because they beat Huntsmen, Faze, and Empire, 3 of the top 4 teams in this event, I think you've got to put them at 5. I think they have a decent chance to make a little bit of a run, maybe to top 6 or so at champs, maybe even a little higher. I don't really see them being able to win it, which is maybe why I should put them below Subliners and Ravens, but I'm going to keep them at 5 for the recent hot streak they have. Then at 4, I think this is like the first time I feel pretty confident about the order of the top 4. I don't think there's any other way you can order it. I think 4 is the Huntsmen. They don't make it to the semifinals this weekend, obviously because of some extreme issues that they have with connection and stuff, and they didn't play great, but I still think they're a very good team with potential to win at champs. They start already in like top 8 or whatever in winners. I don't see a possible way that Huntsmen don't at least make top 6. I think they should be able to make top 4. I think you should see them on that final weekend, especially with the caliber of players. But to me, they haven't been able to beat Florida head-to-head recently. Florida wins a tiebreaker over them and starts as the 3 seed. So I think Florida's slightly above them for now. And then obviously Dallas and Faze have looked extremely good recently, so they've got to be ahead of them. So at 3, I've got Florida. Dallas has owned them recently, so they have to be above them. And then I think Atlanta is just overall the better team and more consistent, especially with Atlanta's form this weekend. Atlanta and Dallas both appear to be in much better forms than Florida, so they're at 3. And then, no surprise, Dallas is in my number 2. They looked good this weekend, but main reason they fall to number 2 is because FaZe was 9-0 throughout the first 3 matches, and they 3-0'd Dallas in pretty dominant fashion. So I put FaZe at 1. So then my power rankings, I put Atlanta and Dallas in a tier 1 by themselves right now, I think. And that tier 1 is like favorites for events. And then in the tier 2, I put Florida and Huntsmen, which is like, you would not be shocked at all if they win an event. It's very valid to pick them to win an event. They're a team with potential to win an event, and they should be in the top 4 at all events, but they're just not on that same level as those tier 1 teams. And then in my tier 3, it's kind of a pretty big tier 3. I'm putting Toronto, New York, Ravens, and OGLA all in the tier, simply because I think they're all pretty much even at this point. They're teams that are, if you pick them to win champs, it's kind of like, that's kind of a long shot, but at the same time, they do have like an outside chance to win it. They're all very good teams with potential to win it, but you're kind of like, I don't know if I feel confident picking them to win it. And then the tier 4, I'm putting Paris and Minnesota in that tier 4. Minnesota I didn't want to put in there simply because I feel like they're just in such bad form right now, but they do start in winners at champs, so I'm putting them there. I think these are teams that have a chance to cause an upset at champs and maybe make a run and somehow find themselves in like top 6 maybe, but I don't think they have any chance to win champs. And then in the tier 5 at the bottom, we've got Surge and LAG. Actually, I'm going to put Surge in tier 5 by themselves. I think they're a team that is an extreme long shot to make, like, not win champs. I think they have 0 chance to win it, but I think they're like a team that has a super long shot to maybe like make a run to top 6 and get in the money and stuff. Just because of respect for the caliber of players in their team. And then Gorillas are in 12. They're a team that I can't even see them making a run to like top 8 or top 6. I don't think they're going to beat Optic in the first round. So they're in like a tier 12, like just no chance to me. Then lastly, the last thing to get into is like takeaways and kind of like hot takes from the weekend. Some things I saw this weekend that I wanted to talk about. The first thing that needs to be addressed, you all know what it is. I talked about it a little bit when talking about some teams. The map glitch, if you want to call it that. It needs to be fixed. It's absolutely ridiculous that it's in the game at this point, and I don't even know how long it's been in the game. I'm not a cheater like that. I wouldn't resort to that if I knew it was in the game. I don't really play this game too much competitively. I mostly just watch this one, but I mean, I would never resort to some cheap. I wouldn't even feel like I'm winning if I win a match. I don't know how people can feel good about winning matches if they're doing this. I guess they're saying money is money and other teams might be doing it, so how do we know? But I mean, I would feel like I'm cheating myself if I was cheating in the game like this. And I saw a post from Reddit where Crim basically said they don't consider it cheating. They being, I guess, Infinity Ward or the CDL. I'm not really sure. I think it's Infinity Ward. They don't really consider it cheating or a glitch. So technically, the league can't do anything about it. To me, this is ridiculous. I think it destroys the competitive integrity of the game and completely changes it. I mean, I know people were accusing like Classic and Toronto a lot of it, and obviously we don't know for sure. I really hope they weren't doing it, but who knows? Maybe every team was doing it. It seemed like Chicago said they couldn't believe people were doing that. They didn't know about it, and I'm assuming teams like Atlanta, Chicago, and Dallas, your top teams with veterans, aren't doing it. At least I hope. I hope nobody's doing it. But this like hurts players. Like think about players like Zuma or shottzyy, who make sneak plays they're making like big route plays and big flanks, and they can't even do them anymore because if you throw yourself at a scrap on a hill and you die, you can hit start, pull up the minimap and see, oh, Zuma's on a flank here in this location, or shottzy's waiting here to try to get squad spawns to come up here. And then you can just go sneak him out and kill him. It ruins the game. I mean, that's the whole point of COD, is trying to have the awareness to like, no, this person might be here, this person rotated here. Okay, we killed 4 people. We've killed 4 people twice, but shottzyy hasn't been those 4 people. Where is shottzyy? Where is he hiding? And when you could just pull up the minimap and say, oh, shottzy's back there, instead of him being able to make a crazy play. It's so dumb. People are intentionally dying to find out where other people are. It completely ruins S&D because once you die, you can hit start and know where everyone is. And if you see 5 people are running towards A, well, guess what? Wow, they're taking the bomb to A. It ruins the game in a lot of ways. To me, if they're unwilling to fix it, I think the CDL should put in a rule where they I think you can go in the game settings and just turn off kill cams. It's an easy fix for the CDL to help competitive integrity, even if Infinity Ward doesn't want to fix it because they're saying it's intended to be in the game, which I don't know how that could possibly be intended to be in the game. But I think the CDL should just turn off kill cams for champs, so that way we can have players doing this, because cheating for $4.6 million, man, it's already online. We don't need people cheating in this way, because even if Infinity Ward says it's not cheating, to me, that's completely and obviously cheating. And like I said, we don't know what teams are doing it. A lot of people accuse Toronto. I hope they aren't, because I really like Toronto as a team. I hope they weren't cheating. I hope nobody was cheating this weekend. It ruins the game. Then next take I kind of have is this is the most up in the air champs ever. As I talked about in my power rankings, I can honestly see a world where 1 through 8 of my power rankings have anywhere from a good chance to even a slight chance to take home first. And I don't think in many champs in the history of COD we've been able to say like our 8th best team has a chance. Obviously, like OGLA and like London and New York, those teams that are around that area, they don't have a great chance. But to even say they have a small chance to take home first is pretty crazy. Part of it is probably certainly being online. But either way, I'm excited to watch champs regardless, because I think we're in for a great one. I think it's very competitive, and I think a lot of teams have upset potential. And Cinderella stories and teams that aren't very good with upset potential always make for the best champs. When we have those open bracket teams like Singularity and Sicario and stuff last year, that always makes for the most entertaining champs. And then next thing I want to talk about, CleanX and Cammy. Regardless of if anything was going on with the kill cam, those two are disgusting. And it's super cool for me to see, because I know some NA fans really don't want to see APAC and EU succeed, and they want to like try to assert this NA dominance over them. But to me, I don't understand that, because if the league is to become better and better each year, we're going to need the APAC players to keep getting better. And the EU players, I think the APAC players are maybe still a little bit below, but EU players, especially at the top, are pretty much on the same level as NA players now, not like it used to be. And to me, the more good EU players we have, the more good APAC players we have, the more good NA players we have, we're just getting more and more countries that are probably going to support the CDL, and more teams with more competitive players, because there's only so many good players in NA. And I think it's really cool that like a team like London is full of EU players, because that kind of like helps the brand to me. And I think it'd be really cool if one day the Paris Legion could be just full of French players, because that's, I mean, cooler than like Kismet. Great, he has a spot in the league, but him playing for Paris is a little weird. I think it'd be really cool if a bunch of people from France played for Paris, and a bunch of people from the UK play for London. I think that'd be really cool. Obviously, for the United States, it's going to be like travel all over, because you're not going to find 5 people from California for LA or 5 people from Minnesota for the rocker. But I think it's really cool when we have all these good EU players, because I mean, recently, since like the modern times when EU, APAC, and NA weren't split by region anymore, and they were all in the same league since like World War II, I believe it started. We've seen like the exact same EU players be on top, guys like Bance or Zero or Rated or Scraps, Wuskin, Jerd. Guys like that have all been on top, which I love those guys. But to see new EU names like CleanX and Cammy breaking out, I think they said, I don't want to say what country they're from. I can't remember. is CleanX from, I think he might be from Denmark. I don't know. I don't want to screw that up. And then I think Cammy might be Scottish, but I can't remember. Those could be completely wrong. And I think they said that that's the first time that anybody from those countries has ever won an international event, which is really cool. And it's refreshing to see EU players, new ones come up. And I hope it continues. I hope we have a whole new wave of a bunch of really good EU players. Like Dylan came out, broke out last year. Alex broke out in like World War II. I hope we keep seeing this influx of EU players, because even though I'm from NA, I'm from America, I like to see all the regions succeed, because guess what? That makes it more competitive. And the more competitive the league is, the more fun it is to watch. And then once again, we had more issues with player disconnects and extreme lag with Chicago. And this might sound bad to say, but I think it's almost good or best that it happened to Chicago here in the event before champs. And hear me out on this one. If you're a Chicago fan, don't get upset at that. I'm saying that because Chicago is by far the most popular team. They have the biggest fan base. So the CDL is definitely getting more complaints than they did when it happened to Seattle or when it's been happening to OGLA this year. Chicago's got the biggest fan base, so I'm assuming they're getting more complaints on Twitter and stuff than they've ever received at the CDL since Chicago was screwed because of connection this weekend. And my hope is that all this negative feedback and all these people tweeting at them how bad everything is, that kind of wakes them up, and maybe they'll be forced to make changes or improving or adding more servers leading up to champs. It didn't really hurt Chicago. Obviously, if they were able to win, they could have gotten the 1 seed, which would be better. An extra round bye will never hurt you. But I think in almost a way, this could end up being a positive. If so many Chicago fans do complain to the CDL, maybe they can do something to fix it, or Activision or Infinity Ward. Who knows? They probably won't because it's Infinity Ward. But hopefully they could do something to fix it. And then the last thing I want to get into is the regular season. I'll be honest, I'm kind of glad the regular season is over. Champs is always my favorite time of the Call of Duty year. Obviously, it's the biggest tournament. It's usually got the most hype moments. It's the most fun to watch always because you're playing for the most. It's just like, would you rather watch regular season NFL or NBA, or would you rather watch playoffs? The playoffs are always more entertaining. It's got the best people in it. And you guys already probably know this, but I just can't stand this game. I don't like this game competitively at all. And that being said, I still love doing the podcast, and this is on a game I can't even stand. So I can't imagine how much I'll enjoy doing the podcast on a game that I hopefully love next year, or at least like and enjoy playing, because I barely even play this game because I just don't enjoy it. But I've enjoyed every Treyarch title, so I can't imagine how much I'll enjoy doing the podcast next year on a game that hopefully I at least like and is playable to me. And I think there's no way that Treyarch fails us close to this bad as we were failed this year, with no support from the developers for competitive, despite them having a franchise league. I don't want to rant on it because I'll never understand it. But yeah, I'm kind of glad that the regular season is over. Excited to watch champs, but excited to get to the new game a little bit. And I'm looking forward to a game with more competitive support, with spawns that make sense, and no domination for a third game mode. Domination is trash. It is trash, trash, trash. I'm not even a big fan of CTF, but CTF is more entertaining, and at least it makes sense. It's so much more. Dom just isn't competitive. Even in a game with normal spawns, Dom just isn't a competitive mode. CTF is better for competitive. Obviously, Uplink is, but Uplink without jetpacks is... I don't think it'd be very good. That's what like Gridiron was in World War II. I don't think that'd be very good. And then to me, Control, the best third game mode for boots on the ground. I think Control's great. Just give us anything but Dom with a game that makes sense. If the game has a decent maps, decent to good normal spawns, support from the developer, and a decent third game mode, we've already got a game that's 100 times better than this one. So I just hope that we can get a better game this year. I know I'll enjoy doing the podcast regardless, but I mean, I think I'd have even more fun doing the podcast on the game I love. So a little mini rant there, but I think probably all of you agree with me. If you've got any experience playing competitive COD, I think you all agree with me. Then hopefully next year with a better game, we can keep growing as a community even more. We can have more people to talk to and stuff in this little CDL podcast community. But yeah, that's kind of my little mini rant for the episode. So that's going to do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this final episode of the Modern Warfare regular season. You can look out for the pre-champs predictions. Those will probably come out I think champ starts like the 19th, so around like the 12th or 13th of August will be the pre-champs, because I'm going to give those 2 or 3 weeks in case somebody all of a sudden decides to bench somebody for one of their subs because of whatever reason, or if a meta change happens. I don't want to make predictions like next week, and then if a huge meta change happens and let's say Chicago gets way worse with it and OGLA gets way better, or Chicago all of a sudden is the best team in the game in this new meta, I don't want to like pick Chicago to go out top 4 and then all of a sudden I see after my predictions that Chicago, everybody's saying they're the best team in the game now. So I'm going to wait on that a little bit until like the week before the playoffs starts to do that. But in the meantime, we're going to do some other COD-related videos that aren't podcasts. I think I'm going to try to get like a video where I say like my dream team for 4v4 based on how people played in 4v4. So people like Karma might be included, although you maybe don't think Karma's the best anymore in the 4v4 era. So like people like Scump would also be valid for that, or Formal, because they were insane overall from like it'll be from like BO2 to IW, or BO2 to World War II, I guess, for the 4v4 era. So like players like Scump could have a valid argument to be in it because he was insane from that time period. Not much in World War II. And then I might do one where like I pick my dream team for 5v5, only accounting for how the people played in Black Ops 4 and in Modern Warfare, since those are the two 5v5 games. And then might do like my dream team just regardless of pure talent. If I had to make a team for next year based on pure talent right now, who I do, and then maybe a team of 5v5 of my favorite players. No roles, no if they're going to be good or not, just my favorite players. But yeah, let me know if you guys want to see that or other videos that are COD related in between, because we have like a 2 to 3 week break where there's no actual podcast episode, but I'll fill in with some other COD videos. Then be sure to leave a like on this one if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. I think I looked at the analytics like yesterday or 2 days ago, and it still says like 70% of you that watch the videos aren't subbed. So if you're coming back each time to watch a video, or you've watched a couple and you're not subbed but you do enjoy it, I'd really appreciate if you dropped a sub. We can keep growing our community, keep having more discussion. The discussion on Twitter has been really great. I've had people DMing me, and we have good conversations about the games over there, which is really fun. And we're now on the road to 200 subs, so if you could help us get there, I'd love that. And then comment your thoughts on the weekend down below, as well as any hot takes or questions you have for me. If you have a question about the event, my opinion on it, my opinion on anything. If you want to know my opinion on something that happened in BO2, as long as I know about it, we can talk about that too. Anything that happened in COD, anything you want to know. Drop a question or a hot take down below, or whatever you want to do. Then also drop a follow on the CDL Podcast Twitter. Link is in the description. Like I said, we have great live interaction there during the matches. Some of you can attest to that. Some of the people that regularly comment on here, I've been talking to a lot in the DMs on Twitter or through mentions and stuff. I'll see you guys in the upcoming week for some different videos. Like I said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, whatever it may be, and then I'll see you in the podcast leading up to champs. Thanks for watching.